Examining formalization and practice in the governance of open source software communities, we ask, do we run how we say we run? By Mahasweta Chakraborti et al. Governance of open source is important to examine because open software is a public good, and the systems that communities develop to manage those public goods are important for society. We look at the Apache Software Foundation and its incubator for a case to understand the relationship of stated formal governance to the informal governance that occurs in practice. The ASF hosts over 300 projects. New, younger projects will join the ASF incubator to benefit from ASF services and community. In the incubator, they adapt their own style of governance in return for receiving the legal and administrative and community support of the foundation. Governance from the incubator, essentially imposed on these projects, spans many subjects. All projects work openly, conducting project business on public email channels. In operating under the foundation, projects have their own local norms and rules nested within foundation policies, and we're interested in the relationship of these. We'll define a governed topic as an aspect of project governance that's addressed by formal policy. We'll call a governed activity, or essentially the rules in use, those governed topics that are brought up in daily practice, which we extract by emails. Policy extent is essentially the number of sentences of formal policy dedicated to each governed topic. And policy internalization is the extent to which community activities are conducted in the same terms defined by policy. With these, we ask, are formal and practice governance proportional in amount? What predicts internalization of formal regulations? And how do governed activities and policy internalization actually relate to project outcomes? Examining over 700,000 emails containing over 2 million policy statements extracted from 214 projects scraped from ASFI mailing lists, we extract our key variables, policy extent, policy internalization, and several project level covariates. After tokenizing all policy and email into sentences, we also disambiguate compound sentences. This allows us to treat a rule with many conditions as separate rules, one for each condition, allowing us a fair comparison and fair, accurate reflection of policy extent. From this step, we embed all of these sentences, and this allows us to perform both clustering and compute semantic similarities. From this, we're able to get about 42 governed topics and align them between emails and formal policy. Our entire pipeline takes us from raw emails all the way through to similarity scores and our regressions. With this work, we first address our Q1. On the left, the blue indicates policy extent, the amount of essentially sentences dedicated to the 42 governance topics. And on the right in the orange, we have governed activity. And our finding is that these are not correlated, that those subjects most heavily regulated are not necessarily those that experience the most activity by projects on the ground in their emails. However, relating policy extent to internalization, we do find a significant correlation that governance topics with the most formal policy are those whose activity shows the most internalization, the greatest amount of semantic similarity to the text, to the formal text. This is another way of measuring the relationship of rules in use to rules in form. Last, we measured the ability of policy extent and policy internalization to predict project outcomes, specifically whether projects ultimately graduate to become official projects of the Apache Software Foundation or not. And after this, we conduct several post hoc tests for robustness. Overall, we find for RQ1 that formalization is less apparent in the volume of observed governed activity. For RQ2, we find that activity hews most closely to policy descriptions in more extensively policy domains. And 3, we find several significant effects from these regressions. However, they come from those governance topics that are actually less regulated, that have less policy extent. Those subjects with the most policy extent weren't related in their in-use component to project outcomes. Overall, we don't necessarily find that communities run how they say they run. Actual policy extent and OSS operations may be divergent. However, more heavily formalized policies are more deeply internalized by communities. Governed operations and policy internalization are important predictors of project outcomes. And overall, we conclude that foundations may find conversions with communities through comprehensive participatory policy making. Thank you.